Okay, we need a. Looks like we need to get started here. Rick?
It is officially 6 o'clock.
It's officially 6 o'clock. So I'm going to call this Lacey City Council work session to order. We do have a quick amendment for this evening's agenda. We're adding a quick executive session at the end of our meeting pursuant to RCW 42-30-1101G. With that, can I get a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. We have approved an amended agenda. I just want to let the public know that we're all here, but Councilmember Kunkel is unable to make it with us this evening. I also want to acknowledge that we, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and the Squaxin Indian Tribe. With that, are we expecting any more legislators here this evening?
Representative Hunt and Representative J.T. Wilcox have RSVP.
Okay, I know that as well, and they're not here yet. So my recommendation is that can we go to the next agenda item, and let's maybe go through one or two here and see if they show up, and we'll go from there. So let's go to our next agenda item, which is the Dispute Resolution Center Landlord Tenant Tenant Contract Update. And I'll turn it over to Jennifer. Unless she wasn't expecting to be here so quick.
They may not have, they may be looking at the, okay, Jennifer is on virtual.
Jennifer, are you there?
Yep,
Allowed to
both
talk.
Both Jennifer and Jody are there, so, perfect.
There's Sam. Okay.
Jennifer should be,
We're trying to bring Jennifer in.
Declined to be promoted. She's like, nope, I will not. You can't force me.
I'll let her. I just noted, sent a note to her to join.
Is Ryan here? Do we want to go on to the next one real quick? I know we're yeah. Okay.
Where's Ryan and Jen- oh. Yep. You got spots over there.
So
I think Jennifer will be providing the presentation.
Yeah, believe it or not, we skipped our first agenda item, so we're going to go straight into this your agenda item. So I'm going to turn it right. Do you want to turn on your?
Thank you. My apologies to everybody. Thank you. It's really nice to see everybody. Happy holidays. I think that's a fair request, actually.
1889.
Hi, Jody. Thank you for being with us. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a little bit of recap so that we can remember where we were on this issue with the Dispute Resolution Center. So in late August of this year, the city approved our city manager to enter into a contract with the DRC to maintain access to conciliation and mediation services for issues between landlords and tenants in the Lacey city limits. Contract for services began in the month of September and were approved through December 31 of 2023. Monthly costs for the city have included a monthly fixed cost of $1,250 per month, which helps cover DRC operations. Established fees for services rendered are currently set at $175 per party per session for conciliation cases, and $315 per party per session for mediation services. The cap for city contributions for these services was determined not to exceed $50,000. Council agreed that the usage should be evaluated at the end of the year, at which time we would come back together and reevaluate the current need, usage, and future direction for the services that we are offering to members of our rental population and housing providers. So what is the feedback to date? Well, the DRC has been very diligent to advertise these services among our local apartment complexes, property management firms, and even manufactured home communities by way of in-person communication and several presentations from both the DRC staff and also planning staff here at the City of Lacey. There has not to this point been a significant usage of these services. So to date, one conciliation case has been billed to the city in the month of October for a total of $175. However, there were several other calls to the DRC, but they did not result in a billable service. The DRC does believe, however, that this program takes time to gain momentum, and in their professional experience, they believe there is still a strong need for these services in our community. So where should we go from here? And are there options for us to do something different? So very recently, and on 2 different occasions, the City Council has heard public comment from local HOA members, both from Aldea Glen and Rainier Park. Concerns were expressed regarding management of the HOA board, as well as some ongoing issues among neighbors. However, the state legislatures often struggle with the dilemma of how to appease one group, in this case, the homeowners, without alienating another group, in this case, the HOAs. So most often conflicts among HOA members result in court proceedings, which becomes very costly for all parties and rarely yields a timely result that satisfies all sides. HOAs are well documented for abuse of power, lack of transparency, and often dysfunction, leaving many residents concerned about what steps to take when an issue arises in their neighborhood. Concerned homeowners most often face a challenge trying to gain any support from state legislators. So this imbalance is more recently being considered in states such as Florida and California, who have enacted legislation which mandates that prior to any HOA dispute being filed in a court system, mediation must first be attempted. Though the DRC services may not be able to help all HOA concerns, we do believe that DRC services could provide an option to resolve concerns if the scope of the service were changed or expanded. So one option the city could consider with the DRC contract that we currently have would be to expand the scope of services. So currently, where the services read landlord and tenant, which again was a continuation of the original state-initiated pilot program, We could use language that reads simply housing stability, and this could change. This change could allow HOA members to potentially utilize the services of the DRC. And then if the scope of the contract were changed, other concerns might also be able to be addressed in our community, such as, again, neighbor-to-neighbor conflicts, or even neighbor-to-neighbor conflicts within, say, an apartment complex. However, the City Council could decide not to continue a contract in year 2024, or we could look to other possibilities with the DRC, such as possibly paying for services as needed instead of the current structure of the contract, which again includes that monthly cost of $1,250. So this evening, we have with us the Executive Director of the DRC, Jody Serbier. And thank you again for being with us, Jody. And so we'd like to just really open this up for a general discussion and maybe direct some of our questions to Jody at this time.
Sure. And I've talked to the city manager about this since I knew it was coming before us tonight. And I think my recommendation would be we still have money left over. We haven't, didn't spend this money. It wasn't used as much as we were hoping it would be used. But I do think it makes a lot of sense that we open this up to HOAs. We've had some situations for HOAs, and I'm not sure as an HOA, been involved in HOAs, what you think about mediation. But I do think it would make more sense for us to go on a as-needed basis, and instead of having a monthly fixed cost, we should do it as billed as needed for our community, and we go from there. But Lenny, you have?
So I agree with part of what you said. I agree that we should go month to month. I was, as you know, opposed to this contract from the beginning. But I don't see where it is the city's function to get involved in neighbor-to-neighbor disputes. That's a civil matter, as is matters of residents of an HOA with the HOA board. I just don't see where we have any business being involved in that conflict.
Mm-hmm.
It's a civil matter. They need to deal with it they can hire mediators. They can do it through mediation instead of going to court, absolutely. I just don't see it as a city function.
Well, I know you don't see that, but we do have people contacting us quite a bit from HOAs and
They
saying.
contact us for all kinds of things.
Sure.
That doesn't make it a city function. I mean, I've gotten 20 emails this week that we should do something to, end the war in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
It's not a city function.
Sure.
I don't see this the same way. It's not a city function.
Councilmember?
I confess I don't have the same level of experience with HOAs that Lenny or Carolyn does, but I'm curious, would an HOA have an incentive to participate in voluntary mediation with its residents? Because this is not a compulsory program, and so could there be a benefit to HOAs to utilize this service? Because we do have residents coming to us indicating that they haven't been able to resolve the dispute by communication just between the HOA and the residents.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure who can answer that question.
I think one of the challenges with these type of, is going into dispute resolution, there has to be willingness by both sides. And so if you make it mandatory, you're just forcing two people, if they're not willing to be there, to be there. That's why this is an option, and this could be an option. And it could be a option versus going to the more expensive civil court process. I think we heard in some public comment in the past about the city should have an administrative judge system, which is very expensive as well. But this is just a low cost. If they're willing to do so, it's an incentive for them to do so, if that's something that the council would like to be encouraging. And I understand that Councilor Greenstein's, the role of the city and these neighborhood disputes, and but that is something that when we set this program up initially, we were losing a program that was funded by state and federal dollars to see what landlord-tenant issues can be resolved. But then this could be an expansion of that program if we wanted to continue it.
Mm-hmm.
I was,
Go ahead. Real quick.
to add to that, I've been on the council 12 years, and yes, we've got that one that's been to us recently, but in 12 years, that's the only one I can think of that's come to us to try to resolve the problem. Are we trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist? Mm-hmm. We got to remember that an HOA, and being the president of a rather large one for 13 years here in Lacey, the HOA is the members. The people that live there are the HOA. There's not two separate entities. It's not the HOA versus the residents. The residents are the HOA. Mm-hmm. That the residents as a whole make up the HOA. They elect from amongst the homeowners the board. So it's not, they're not two different entities. They are one entity.
I'll go,
Yeah.
Councilmember.
I largely agree with what both of you are saying, but, I've been on the HOA board in my neighborhood, which happens to be Rainier Park, which is one that came to us recently. And in those 20 years, we get a lot of neighbor-to-neighbor conflicts that they expect the board to sort out for them, and we generally try to give it back to them to work out rather than intervening. And so I'm sensitive to what, Lenny, you're saying about the role. However, I think it's gotten increasingly fractious over the last several years. I think the pandemic had something to do with that, and people being more short-tempered and frustrated and all that. So having another tool in the box, I think, could be helpful. So if we decide to do this, perhaps we do an outreach to the HOAs, advising them that there is this tool. But I would very much recommend that if we do this, that both the complainant and the HOA both be required to pay into this in order to take it seriously.
So then that takes the city out of this.
Yeah.
I can only speak from firsthand experience, and because I used to live in an HOA, and though it was awesome at the beginning, it slowly became more and more of a police state, if you will. And, some people have the resources where they can just up and move and go somewhere else and not fight it, and some people can't. They're forced to be there. I believe us, as a government in general, often has the duty of regulating stuff, especially when they mandate for developments like Hawks Prairie to be built, that they have to have an HOA. Then I think you have a responsibility to make sure those HOAs aren't being ran like a police state, if you will, for lack of a better term. So I think, yes, this is a civil matter, but at the same time, we represent the people, and the people a lot of them are feeling like they're just being abused. And I mean, I'll give you one case scenario, my personal thing. I lived on the corner, Whitney and McKinley, up in northeast Lacey. There was an accident in front of my house. It was there for 20 minutes. 3 days later, I got a letter saying, you got to remove your dilapidated vehicle or we're going to fine you. And it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Or they take a picture of your garage door from the street and they say, replace the panel because it's dented. And you look into the picture and you're like, I don't even see a dent.
Yeah.
And it's just,
So,
I mean,
I get
somewhere there's a happy medium.
I get where everyone's coming from. I keep coming back to what our role is as a local government. And I have always seen our role as a local government is to provide services to our community, and sometimes services that's not being provided currently within the system. I think this is a service, a much-needed service, because as has been pointed out, there is more and more conflict that's happening between neighbor and neighbor, HOAs and neighbors. And what I say is let's see how it does. I think it should be on a case-by-case basis. I think we should offer this opportunity, let the HOAs know, let people know that if you have a problem with your neighbor, and I've gotten a lot of more complaints over the years about HOAs, and I just forward them on to the city. Maybe that doesn't go out to the councils, but I've gotten a lot of them, several over the years. And so I think it'd be nice to say, hey, this is a civil matter. The city cannot intervene, but there is a service that hopefully the HOA and you, or neighbor and neighbor can abide by and take advantage of the service and go that way.
Is them paying for it or the city paying?
Well, we have this money set aside for the exact same thing. I would say we continue to move this budget over to next year, because we've already had it budgeted, move it over to next year, and then let's reevaluate and see how much it's been used.
Well, and we're talking about one piece of this. This is kind of an update in general on how this program's going, and I think we haven't seen a lot of utilization, so we're talking about expanding the program. But I also didn't want to skip over the fact that I know the DRC did extensive outreach, right? That was,
Correct.
Jennifer mentioned that. And I do think that there may be an element of, this is a newer program, that Lacey is providing this support to residents, and word may not have gotten out yet entirely, even though we've been doing that outreach. I know also that in a minute, we're going to talk with our legislators about some of the things we want to see at the legislative level, and funding for low-income housing protections like like preventing evictions is on the list, right? We want to make sure that people who need help staying housed can stay housed, because it's a better use of our funds than trying to address homelessness. I see this program in general as one tool in preventing evictions and getting to a better outcome for both property owners and tenants. So I would like to see us continue this program, whether or not we expand it to HOAs.
Well, I skipped over the legislators. I'd like to get back to them as soon as possible. Do we have some consensus on this to, oh, look, Sam, do you want to speak?
There is, look at that, whoa. We too get complaints, and Senator Patty Cooter is working on legislation. I'm not sure just what it will, but she's trying to address some of the issues with the homeowner associations, the more gregarious ones, and how you can, try to reach some peace between the homeowners association and
And members, yeah.
and others, yeah, but, I think sometimes we get these homeowners associations, the builder creates a homeowners association, it just carries on infinitum and ad infinitum, and maybe, hopefully we will find some ways to address and to ameliorate some of the concerns.
I'd like to take we can table this till, no hurry, right? We could table this if we want more discussion, but, I move that we move the existing budget over to our 2024. We go by a case-by-case basis, and we add the HOAs as access to this program. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Well, there's a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Opposed.
The motion carries. Okay. Now, let's go back to our first agenda item, which is our state delegation, and thank you, guys, appreciate it. And we do have our little state priorities, and I know was it last week? All my weeks are running into each other. There's Thurston County Legislative body got together to talk about some of our priorities, and of course, we support theirs as well. And we have this little handout. But, before, I just want to, again, thank the legislators for this last legislative session. We were able to secure little over $1 million for the Great Kuya Park for the ADA accessibility path and the inclusive playground. We got over $100,000 to upgrade a transformer at the regional athletic complex. So now we can do our electric vehicle charging stations. Of course, they addressed some concerns that we have brought up last year concerning the commercial airport siting. That was part of our legislative asks, and of course, the law enforcement vehicle pursuits. Then your ongoing leadership when it comes to adopting the operating budget that supplied the $60 million to local governments and nonprofits to provide the housing and wraparound service to unhoused individuals in the right-of-ways, and then your continued advocacy for Interstate 5 corridor between Mounts Road and Tumwater, and that resulted in $32.5 million in the 2025 to 2027, and $26 million in the 27 to 29 for that project. Our number one request has just flipped a little bit, and the council, we haven't even had to be able to talk about this with the full council, even though I brought it up last week, and that has to do with our Thurston County Regional Basic Law Enforcement Academy and Training Center. That we had mentioned it later and as a priority, and this was something that we really thought we were going to be advocating for in the future. But as I had mentioned last week, we're building our police station, and part of that process of building our police station, we did bid, to see what, if we could possibly build this regional this regional training center. And the bids have come back, and this council this next Thursday is going to be making a decision. But we're in a very unique opportunity to actually see this facility built and be a major asset for this entire region. One of the things that we have heard from law enforcement and talking to other law enforcement agencies around Thurston County is there's a backlog when it comes to training officers. So if you hire an officer, we're talking, it can be 12 to 18 months before they get trained, and then another even longer once they come back to whatever law enforcement they're have been hired at and do additional training. We have a facility that we're going to hopefully be able to build that can act as a regional center. And so, instead of them having to go off to academy, there's an opportunity for them to do academy right here in Thurston County through a satellite. And this is something that the legislature has been talking about for a while, is how do we get more satellite training centers, especially with all the requirements that have come along recently for training for law enforcement. This is an idea that's been talked about, and we've seen other places where they're trying to do it, and they just don't have the space. Well, sure enough, we're going to hopefully have the space right here, and so this has now become our #1 priority for the city of Lacey, because we can make this sort of this dream that we thought we're going to have and have to work for the next maybe 10 years actually come to reality. And so behind the scenes, we've been talking to our partners here in Thurston County, saying, hey, if we are able to build this, would you be able to use it? Would you use it? And everyone, all the feedback so far has been really, really great. And so we're talking everyone from the Sheriff's Department, Olympia, Tumwater. We have opportunity with State Patrol. We have opportunity to work with SPSCC for them to do a training program for this. We're working straight with SPSCC. And of course, we need help with additional trainers at the facility once it gets open too, instead of having them go off to the academy and be able to do academy right here. So it's going to be able to
Mr. Mayor,
serve a lot of different
you may
functions.
want to, just because I'm not sure how familiar they are, you may want to give a little of the background about how we got here because of the bids from the police
Sure.
station build.
Go ahead.
So that
And-
kind of
and
a little more
so-
context to this.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to staff, and then after this, I know Shannon's going to go on with the rest of our priorities, but this was not something 2 weeks ago we thought we'd be coming to you and talking about. We didn't think it was going to be a possibility. And then the bids came in, and then all of a sudden, it looks like it could be a possibility. Then that's why that's why we're bringing it up right now. That's why we brought it up last week, because we just got the bids, and now we're bringing it up again now. So I'll turn it back over to Rick.
Thank you. I'll try to just give a real quick background and we can get on with the rest of the agenda. So several years ago, of course, we have the current Lacey Police Department in the original portion of the City Hall, and it was built in the early 80s. The original design was, I think, to accommodate somewhere around 30 employees. We had a little bit of expansion in 2005, and now to accommodate another 10 or 15 employees, but now we have somewhere about 80 employees working out. So it's been, and then plus the condition of the space has been really challenging. So we've identified a need for a new space to continue to expand our services and operations to meet the community needs. So we looked at what are the essential needs, and originally the project started out with a police station combined with a training facility because we also have currently no place to conduct training. We have a little space downstairs in our basement to do some defense tactics or de-escalation type techniques, but really no quite training facility. So we originally looked at a design with a police station combined with a training facility. But as we started looking at cost estimates, we found that we couldn't quite afford all of that. So we ended up splitting the training center off as a future phase, as a standalone building that we could build at a later date as opportunity for funding or partnerships could come to fruition. So as we moved through time, we came to the point where we're ready to issue requests for bids on construction that would start in the coming year. And we heard about some favorable bidding climate, so we decided to issue a request for a proposal or bids for a base bid of the police station, but then have alternate bids in succession for, one, the shell of the training facility, then also different stages of building out the interior of the training facility to bring it online. Thinking that we might be able to get the shell built, because that was something that was a priority, because as we're in the construction, if we have to build that in a future date, it would disrupt our operations. Well, as the bid climate came in and we received the bids, we saw that we have the opportunity potentially to build out the complete training center. And so unique environment with the bidding climate, very competitive bids. Plus, if we wait to build it out later, we still have to look for other funding sources and partners, as well as potential future higher costs for construction. So it's an opportunity that we thought would be 5 to 10 years out is now. So we're going to look at considering how we approach that, and then look at approaching the legislature and other partners to see how we can bring not only the opportunity for regional partners to use the facility if it was something that they would had interest, but also how we can bring that satellite facility for the state academy here to get more capacity in training police officers, not only just in basic law enforcement, but all the other measures that we need to have our law enforcement officers be aware of. You know, the de-escalation techniques, all these different pieces of training that we're looking to have be applied in going forward in the future. It also provides an opportunity for consistency as well. And if there's an opportunity with the community college who can apply the part of the curriculum and assign a certificate or associate's arts degree to it, then you're having individuals go through this process coming out with a potential for an associate's arts degree, and they're one step further in that career going into law enforcement with the right tools. So that was the opportunity that we could present ourselves. So next week, the council is going to be considering what they're going to do in awarding the bids, but we want to put this on your radar tonight. And I know we talked about it a little bit at the legislative dinner last week, but we'll put it on your radar tonight just to kind of say this is something we want to kind of start working with you to figure out what is a good ask and how this could work to be a successful opportunity.
Yeah, and so we're really asking, who do you think we should be contacting in the legislature? And because, you know, we're hoping to get some ask out there this session. I know it's a short session, but we're willing to talk to whoever we need to talk about and talk to see if we can get, you know, the training dollars for the additional and hopefully some capital costs as well. You have any ideas?
So I'm a little confused.
Okay.
So there's the Emergency Coordination Center.
Yes.
Is that going to be expanded, or are we talking about two different facilities?
You're talking about.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because the Emergency Coordination Center was something we were working on last year and building, and with the police station, in the public space portion, there's going to be a community room that we also would like to be able to convert into a EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, in the event of a disaster. And so that $300,000 request has been for equipment to outfit that, as well as some generators.
As well as some what?
Generators, things like that can respond to emergency. This is a separate building.
So it is a separate.
This is a separate building.
Yes.
And so this is something we kind of, as we,
Attached to the police station.
it's on the police station property. It's a detached, separate building.
So is this with the police station?
Yes.
Yes, that's going to be inside.
Alright.
Inside.
I know, it
In the
was somewhat,
same
it was somewhat
building.
confusing.
This one goes here, this one goes here.
And quite frankly, when we were looking at this, we're maybe thinking we might be able to get the shell, but the way the bids came in, all of a sudden this became a new thing that developed in the last 2 weeks.
The training center would be attached to the police station. The coordination center is a separate building, but.
Other way
Other way
around.
around.
Other way around.
Okay.
Coordinate, the
So
coordinating
the
center
police
is
station will be
inside.
about 40,000 square feet with, including the EOC or
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
Okay,
And then
so
the-
police station is with the emergency, I just have to say it.
Correct.
Emergency
Nation
coordination
Center,
center.
yeah.
It's going to be inside the police station.
The training center would be separate.
Correct.
But in the same general
Yes.
vicinity.
Same
And where
property.
is that? Is it in 22nd?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's right
right
here.
next
right
door,
here.
right in our property here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Sorry to be slow on the pickup.
And you're right, there's a long history there, because originally it was going to be all one building. And then we're like, there's no way we're going to be able to do this all in one building. And so we had it separated out on a parcel right in behind it. And then we're thinking, oh geez, maybe if we're really lucky, we can build a shell. And now we're looking, well, maybe we can build the whole thing. And if we do build the whole thing, you know, wow, what a regional asset this could be.
And
You already have the money in hand to build the police station? Is
Yes, and possibly this, we just want to make sure if we're going to build it, we have all of our partners and then hopefully a little support, because it will turn into a regional center and not just for the city of Lacey.
Okay, so back to your question about who to talk to. So
Yeah.
John Lovett, Senator
Yes.
John Lovett, is, in the Senate, is really the lead
Yes.
on these issues. And then your capital budget chairs, once you have, you know, and both Rep. Bateman and Senator Hunt sit on the capital budget. Ways and Means, capital budget,
Whatever we
same
call
thing.
it.
Whatever,
Yeah.
they all do it together over there in the Senate.
Okay.
Senator Lovick is key because he has,
Gotta fit into the regional picture.
yeah,
Yeah.
he has been keeping us monthly or bi-weekly updated on what's going on in Pasco, and the Pasco program has been just an absolute success. They've increased members of color and young people, moms who can't take the time to go to North Bend, wherever the training academy, well, not North Bend, I know where it is.
Yeah.
Berrien,
Berrien, yeah.
Berrien. You know, they can do it at home, they'd be home in the evenings and stuff, and they're having real success in recruiting new and different law enforcement officers who, you know, not only will be trained, but will stay in the community as well, most of them.
And I could see that success being replicated here and with a facility that's designed for this purpose
Yep.
as well. And then also too, partnership with the tribe and tribal police to, you know, bring that continuity as well as
Yep,
we look
good.
at law enforcement. We're working on those partnerships too.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon. She's going to run through real quickly the rest of our requests.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Senator and Representatives. I know we've got a new face around here, so maybe just some brief introductions as well to start this off. I'm Shannon Kelly Fong. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Lacey, and if we want to start over on that end.
I'm Rob Barnes. I'm actually Senator McEwen's legislative aide. He's traveling today, asked me to pop in to make sure to get some notes. And
What's he doing all this traveling? I don't know, what's he up to?
he's on a family one this
Yeah.
month. But, you know, and with the, just to say is that, you know, with the coordination and having what you're talking about, it's pretty interesting because Senator McEwen's son is now in training and has to go to Gary. So good points, so it'll be really interesting in that as well. So thanks for having me.
Well, I'm Robin Vasquez. Hello. I'm on the Lacey City Council.
Lenny Greenstein, Lacey City Council.
Malcolm Miller, City of Lacey, Deputy Mayor.
Andy Redder, Mayor of Lacey.
Good evening, Rick Walk, City Manager for the City of Lacey.
And I know I've already introduced myself, but just a reminder to use the mics. You got to turn on the green dot and speak into the mic.
Brian Enslow, I'm the contract lobbyist for the City of Lacey, and I am pretty good at following instructions.
Michael Stedman, council member.
Hi, Jess Bateman, representative for the 22nd.
Carolyn Cox, Lacey City Council.
Beth Dolio, rep in the 22nd.
Sam Hunt, Senator in the 22nd.
Well, thank you for doing those introductions. I'm going to briefly take us through our priorities for the city.
How about the table behind you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dave Schneider, City Attorney's Office.
Hi, Scott Egger, Lacey Public Works Director.
Bobby Hollis, I'm the Deputy Police Chief.
Troy Wu, Finance Director.
Great.
Okay.
So we've got a few documents in front of you, and we're going to go over those tonight. And first, I just want to start off with our priorities. And so this provides just a brief overview of all of the city's priorities for the 2024 session. The other document that you have in front of you is the manual, which provides an overview of some other items that the city is interested in and provides a good snapshot and understanding of where the city is moving into this session. So moving on from what the mayor already went over, if you look at the manual, one of the next priorities for the city is a project that's located at the Regional Athletic Complex. And this is to replace the current lights that are at the rack, which are not LED. They are actually high-intensity discharging lights, which means that they are not very energy efficient, and they do contain heavy gases like mercury. And so the idea with this would be to replace 239 of these HID lamps with much more efficient LED lamps. This is something that is in alignment with the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, which calls for LEDs in public sector buildings. And LEDs would produce a much safer, much brighter. There would also be lighting that you could control, and they would last significantly longer than the lights that are currently there. As you can see, for potential funding sources for this particular project, the City of Lacey is putting in some significant funds, and then we'll also be working with RCO to attempt to get some state funding as well from either the youth field funding or WWRP in 2024, as well as looking to additional funding sources outside of local and state funding. And so this is certainly a project in a city amenity where we see over 2 million visitors and community members alike using not only the fields but the walking trails that exist there, and something that would really add a benefit for the Lacey community moving forward.
Status of the PFD, like, do we have to like update it or?
Oh, that's a good question. Good timing.
The Capital Area Public Facilities District, we just reached agreement with the other partners, the Thurston County, Tumwater, and the City of Olympia for extending it, and we just are circulating that interlocal agreement for signature at this point. So the PFD will extend it an additional 15 years, and then we'll be able to utilize that for expansion for Phase 3. No. But there's the additional PFD that I think there's been some talk about in this area of the Tumwater to look at forming a second PFD that would, okay.
Yes.
Point taken.
It's
But-
just the sponsor of the bill that
Yeah.
harassed us a lot. But it was great for our community, so.
Yeah.
it was nice.
And this next phase,
Harassment.
and this next phase of the RAC is going to be amazing. You know, we've been sort of waiting for this to happen, for this extension to happen, and then we're going to go right into looking at doing our next phase, and so we're really excited about that.
I actually should withdraw my comment. He was advocating for it, and I really, really appreciate Senator Hawkins' work on this bill.
Yeah.
He was great.
Are there any additional questions or comments that the council would like to make on this project? All right, well then, moving on. Our third item, which you can find here on the top right-hand side of the priorities list, is for long-term funding solutions to aid supportive housing acquisitions. And specifically here in the city of Lacey, I know you all are very familiar. You can see some of your faces here in the picture, which is Maple Court, and it's currently functioning as an emergency shelter with the long-term plan to convert it into permanent supportive housing. Currently, there is the state commitment for operating funds for the first 2 years. And as we look beyond that, we certainly are interested in finding some sustainable funding as we continue to operate as an emergency shelter, and then as we look to conversion costs sometime in the future. Councilmember Cox, is there anything you'd like to add on this one?
Thank you, Shannon. My other hat I wear is chair of the Thurston Regional Housing Council. We're a young organization, and we don't have a lobbyist like Brian, but we did this year develop priorities for the legislature, which each of the participating jurisdictions is taking forward. And you'll see the top 3 listed, I think, on the backside, kind of in small print. Not a criticism at all, but just
On page 17
locating it
of
on the
guide.
the back there. The top 3 priorities are to increase funding to meet the continued need for rental assistance for low-income renters in Thurston County. The group felt like this was probably the most critical thing to keep people housed who are on the brink of falling out of housing, and help them stabilize until they're more self-sufficient. The second priority is to provide long-term operational funds for programs established and paid for by the Right-of-Way Initiative. Everybody's familiar now with Maple Court and the wonderful ribbon cutting we had this summer with the governor. But it's gonna, it's funded for a couple of years of wraparound services and operation, and then what? Because, we don't have enough local resource to keep this and the other initiatives that are coming along going. So we're asking for state help to sustain these things as they start operating and continue operating into the future. Maple Court is designed right now as an enhanced homeless shelter with supervision 24/7 and wraparound services, but it is designed to eventually become permanent supportive housing. And there are several other, not just in Lacey, there's several other initiatives, I'm sure you're maybe familiar with some of them, in the area for that. And the third is to increase capital funding through the Housing Trust Fund to develop and preserve affordable housing. It's been such a challenge. It's so much easier for builders to build market rate housing, and trying to find the right incentive set to have more moderate and low-income housing built has been a challenge across the nation, but it's certainly, we're no exception here in Thurston County. So if you like, I can send, well, I know that Brian has the whole list, and we can provide you with the Regional Housing Council's full list. But I'd be glad to take any questions if you have any, since this is kind of new.
Anything?
Okay. Oh, I thought you were turning it on. Okay.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Jess?
Thank you, Councilmember. Representative Dolio made a good comment last week at our regional priorities meeting. We know that there have been a number of resources for paying for rent, and we've gotten through the Apple Health and Homes, which was a recent added Medicaid benefit that is now functional and working, which was news to me. Representative Dolio informed me of that. So I guess from our perspective, I think we would probably want to know how you all are coordinating locally to make sure that the individuals that are living in these permanent supportive housing are able to utilize those benefits, because anytime you have the ability to get those federal Medicaid dollars and state dollars as a resource, it's going to help us if we need to ask for different money and more money for different things to address or help homelessness or permanent supportive housing. So I'm not sure who's working on that. You're the chair right now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
For the next couple of months anyway.
So maybe you could get back to us and maybe talk with folks about that. We'd be happy to plug in if there's necessary for that. But I think because these are new programs up and running, and that's a new benefit, we might not have that answer right now, but we want to make sure that that's part of the path moving forward.
Absolutely. It should be.
Rep. Dolio, do you have any more comments about that?
And
With the Community Action Council on our own rental assistance program. Lacey has been partnering with the Community Action Council on rental assistance through the pandemic, but that, I think that money is just about gone, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Apple Care program is a nice tool to be able to use for helping pay for some of these costs, especially in the permanent supportive housing arena where you're starting to get into that more stabilized. One of the things I might want to have some conversations with Commerce to see how we can apply if we do have individuals that are able to establish their identification, start accessing those benefits and be able to use that for these enhanced shelters. And that's one thing I need to probably do some checking and research. And maybe it's something too that if it's not currently available, it's expanding that program to these type of operations too, once we get people stabilized into case management and getting their information. So we'll do some more working on looking into that, what those options are.
Yeah, I do think that I do think even without the program that is a pathway. I believe some of the residents at Quixote Communities actually are do receive that. That's how they're paying rent and a source of income. The governor's budget was released. He did, in his budget, there's another $100 million into the right-of-way program. So I think that was in the capital budget, but we recognize that operating costs in this community and communities across the state for all of the permanent supportive housing that we are building is
is a big issue. So, I mean, I think it's a point well taken, and definitely hope to work on that this year and in years to come.
And I really appreciate all your efforts to get us to this point, because that's one of the biggest challenges we faced years ago is the infrastructure, the housing and shelter and the beds, and we're starting to see that turn a little bit, so thank you.
And we'll go on to our next agenda item, or the next priority.
Yeah, so our fourth priority is to continue funding for Defense Community Compatibility Account. This was an account that was established in 2019, and in 2023, 2025, they invested around $36 million into projects around Washington State. And I've actually put the project list up here. I realize, though, and I apologize, Councilmember Cox, this font might be even smaller. So I'll take the liberty of reading a few of these projects because they have had impacts on the local community around JBLM. So the first project is the North Clear Zone around the city of Lakewood, and then some work that's been done in the Lakewood Water District. And then if you go down to project number 8 through 11, you've got the first green star is the Oak Harbor School District Hand-in-Hand Early Learning Center. And then there was some funding that also went to a Oak Harbor School District for an elementary school. And then finally, the last star was for the Thurston County Habitat Conservation Land Acquisition Program. So this fund of the $36 million is leveraging an additional $126 million in federal funding, as well as local funding. And so we think this is a really important grant opportunity for communities like the city of Lacey, as well as other communities around Joint Base Lewis-McChord, and that there could be future projects that could impact our city. And one potential project that we're taking a look at for if this would be a possibility or if there's other federal, state funding opportunities could be the Young Child and Family Center. I know you all are very familiar with the Young Child and Family Center, but just as a brief recap, there is a very critical need for early learning and indoor recreation here in the city of Lacey. Since the COVID pandemic, we have seen childcare facilities decrease about 30% here in the area, which puts the North Thurston Public School District in a extreme childcare access desert. And so we're working with our partners that include the North Thurston Public Schools, South Sound YMCA, and others on this Young Child Family Center. And this is one of those projects that we think could really help impact the community as well as our local military installation with JBLM. With that, I'd hand it over to any council members who have any comments about this project. Councilmember Vasquez?
I mean, making sure that we have access to affordable, high-quality childcare increases the financial stability of the community, and we don't have enough. And that's no secret, and it's not unique to Lacey or Thurston County, but we have this opportunity to invest in something that could help military families and help the larger community. And we're not quite ready to get the money yet, right? But we're building partnerships so that perhaps next year we'll be ready to receive funding. So we just are getting ready and hoping that everybody will be on board next year when we have a plan put together to build this. And it's very exciting. I have little kids. My kids are not young enough that by the time this is built, this is going to be as useful to me and my family, but I'm thinking about the people who, you know, one of the parents cannot work because the cost of childcare for their kids is more than they would be able to make if they went to work. So they're not in the economy at all. And so something like this could change that for a lot of families in Lacey.
And a lot of families that are military families. We have a high military population here, and a lot of those families don't have any child care. So even if the spouse has, you know, a career that they left behind in Georgia or North Carolina or wherever the case may be, they get here, and even if we can get their license, you know, updated to the state of Washington because of the program that passed earlier this year, maybe they can, maybe they can't afford child care. So, you know, city manager and I went to D.C. earlier this year. We talked to Senator Murray's office, we talked to Senator Cantwell's office, we talked to Senator Strickland's office, Congresswoman Strickland's office. All of them, especially Cantwell's office, was very excited about this program. And we also talked to the executive director of DCIP, who you know, gave us some guidance on this. This is something that this community really needs, especially after the pandemic when we lost so much childcare, and then the other demographics involved in this is that the kids who do get to access something like this have a much higher success rate in K through 12. So this is one of those community assets that I honestly feel that we probably can't afford to not have. Is just kind of a matter of how do we get there.
Great.
My daughter pointed out that when her son went to first grade, it was like a big pay increase. Because what she was paying is, as you know, what she
Yes.
was paying for childcare.
Yep.
Secondly, you mentioned something about JBLM. I just have to throw something out here. I've been working with a number of other people on a Council of State Governments teacher compact to facilitate teachers from other states teaching in Washington. And we got it through the Senate 49-0 last year, and it ran into an iceberg in the Senate or in the House. But we're working on that because that would certainly, not only for childcare, but for, having more quality teachers in our classrooms.
All right, well, continuing on to another future project. We've got the Joint Animal Services Regional Animal Facility, and so there's no request or anything at this point in time. We just want to bring awareness for a project that we do have coming down the pike. And so you can see the current Joint Animal Services Facility in this photo here. This is a building that was constructed in the 70s. The city purchased it in the mid-90s and converted it from a warehouse into the existing animal shelter. It serves as the regional animal shelter for Thurston County. It provides enforcement. It shelters over 3,000 animals per year. It provides medical care for strays, adoption services, licensing, emergency housing. And the facility is really not in very good shape at all. In fact, we are working on a thank you. We're working on a capital facilities plan, and it is failing. It doesn't meet any current industry standards for animal care, and so we are working in partnership with Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County to take a look at building a new facility in the future in the next couple of years. And so this is a project that we'll continue to make you all aware of, and I'll let you know what the status is, but this is really a regional benefit for all of Thurston County.
As a former member of the Joint Animal Services Committee, as a city council member, I know the inside of that facility is not great. And also, I'm a dog lover, and the amount of noise that the dogs are exposed to because of the close quarters is one of the reasons why it's not up to standard today, because it's very stressful for them and really depletes their quality of life. So happy to help you in any way. I'm sure that this is a couple years out, but I'd love to hear more about it as you move forward.
And the other thing is they're not allowed to take larger animals there either, and there is a big need in Thurston County for actually larger animals. Yeah, livestock, yeah, larger animals, chickens. But I mean, there's a whole bunch of animals that we are not able to serve at this facility, and so we're actually hoping this facility is going to be someplace a little more rural that will be able to allow that. And so we're sort of doing that study right now and looking.
And so while I have you all here, I would like to cordially invite you all to come tour the existing Joint Animal Services facility in the near future, maybe sometime after session. Moving on. So our fifth item on our priorities list is to continue the focus on the I-5 corridor, which I know you all are well aware of. And one of the things that was concerning this year was, we had funding budgeted out moving forward last session for some of the roundabouts. And one of the concerns that we have is that there could be a potential shortfall in funding for the roundabout located on Vale Road and 507, excuse me. And so we're certainly taking a close look at that and wanting to get some more information on that. But one of the things that we'd want to ensure is that with the construction of those three roundabouts, that we have funding for all of the roundabouts, which would act as the alternative to I-5 during construction, or if there were any emergencies that would impede traffic on Interstate 5. And so that's certainly concerning for us because if one roundabout isn't there, then it makes the other two roundabouts less efficient and effective. And this is certainly something that we're going to continue to work with our partners as well as our federal delegation on moving forward. So we don't have any specific asks except for paying attention to that roundabout. Well, it's an estimated, and so again, we're wanting to make sure that we have whatever that shortfall is, if there is a shortfall and gap in funding for that roundabout, which there appears to be.
We don't have the final numbers yet, though, but it's certainly looking that way. That's not going to be enough.
Just for my own clarification, if we got the money this year, would we be able to use it? Or is this another one of those things where we're not quite ready yet to
ready.
move forward with the project? We are ready. So if we receive the funding, it could make a big difference.
Oh, I'm looking at
Mark.
over there. We're not quite ready. Yeah.
And
Hi, Mark Daly. I'm the director at Thurston Regional Planning Council. The county also is requesting that it be for the 27 or the 25-27 biennium.
Okay. So we're just not there yet. Well, that's good. Good to know.
Let's hope the favorable bidding environment continues.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the bidding climate for transportation projects is not the same as what you're experiencing. So there's a very significant shortfall in our transportation budget based on the bids that have come in for major projects. It's like in the hundreds of millions of dollars kind of shortfall-ish kind of thing. There just aren't enough contractors who are doing these big transportation projects in Washington State. So it's a big problem. We're going to be spending some time on that this session. And, Rep. Barkis's ranking on transportation will be very engaged in that. So he's your person there.
Great.
I'm on transportation too, but he's in the room. I'm not.
Go ahead.
I just quickly wanted to interject that the governor's budget proposal, which was released yesterday, did not negatively impact our project like it did last year. So we're still, thanks to all your good work last year, putting the amounts in the biennium as requested. So just wanted to note that we're not kind of fighting upstream all session like we were last session.
All right, well, moving on, like Councilmember Cox already brought up, we also support legislative priorities of the Regional Housing Council, in particular, their top 3 legislative priorities. In addition, we also support the legislative priorities of the Association of Washington Cities, South Sound Military and Communities Partnership, and the Thurston County Shared Legislative Agenda. I mentioned the policy manual, which again identifies broad policies beyond the city's priorities, and so there's certainly a lot more listed in there than what's on the flyer in front of you, the 2-page flyer, and includes more in-depth information, and this is just an example of one. With that is all of our priorities, and I think something we'd be interested in hearing is what your priorities and expectations for the upcoming session is, and if you have any questions on the council's priorities or the council's manuals beyond what you've already asked.
No, it's a short session.
I said today earlier that the purpose is to do 105 days in 60 days. That's what it feels like. So I'm just curious on number 6. I know I'm working with North Thurston Public Schools on the bond issue, and I don't think we have any bond money in for the early learning childcare. But is that a 25-27 goal as well to start working on that? Or?
So the North Thurston Public Schools in this next levy is going to be putting some money in there to help with this, and so it's not going to build the whole thing. Though it's only going to build some of it, and so that's why we're hoping that we can marry their dollars up with other dollars to actually expand and do more of it, especially all the indoor recreational part. They for sure won't have the dollars for that.
Yep.
So they're focusing on maybe having some more classrooms, early childhood classroom setting, but nothing to the full build out what we're hoping for on the full.
And that's planned next to Nisqually Middle School.
Yes.
The old softball fields, or whatever those were.
Yeah. Old Bucknell Fields.
Land was already owned by the.
Anything else? You got anything, Brian? Okay.
I have something that pertains to the cities, and it has to do with recycling. we have woefully underfunded recycling infrastructure in our state, and there was an effort last year and previous years to really create a state-of-the-art recycling system in Washington State. So what we're looking at is pairing extended producer responsibility, so EPR, which moves the producers, the people who are bringing the waste in, so the things that show up at your door from Amazon, for example, that packaging, all of that, they would actually pay based on the amount of material that they bring into our state, that would then fund the recycling system. So basically, it would eliminate the ratepayer's responsibility. You wouldn't have to pay any longer for recycling. It would be funded by the producers. And the producers are in favor of moving to this from a sustainability perspective. Many of them have goals that they need to meet. They can't meet it with government putting money into recycling systems, so they're sort of bonding together and bringing forward solutions to legislatures and countries, actually. And so legislatures around the United States, and then countries beyond. So, and then to really increase the amount of recycling that is collected, it's paired with a bottle bill. So you pay on that food grade material of plastic, and aluminum and glass. You pay a deposit on that and then return it to, basically a grocery store, or there's a little like cubby where it's a great system in Oregon if you've ever seen it work there, and you get that return back. So there's a really great study that just came out. We ranked 15th in the nation for recycling, which is pretty good, but Washington State likes to lead in environmental areas. So this is a big priority for the legislature this year, and it definitely does. We're engaging a lot and negotiating a lot with local governments because you've been on the front lines of funding this and providing this.
Yeah. This is the RAP Act that you're talking about, and they have done this in Oregon, and it's been successful in many cases. In some cases in Oregon, though, there's a mandatory take back, and there are some retail places that are just not set up for this. And so what they're seeing in some retail places is that people are going in and breaking into the recycling places and stealing the bags so they can go and get it other places. And it's turning, I think it's turned into an issue in some places that don't have the space set up for an actual recycling location. So I think that's just the one thing that we want to think about, is that if every place that's currently selling this has to take it, do they have the space? Because what we don't want is for these to be in a space that's not compatible, and now we're dealing with rodents and everything else because they just don't have the proper space. So I think that's just one thing you need to think about. In some places, if it's like within a certain distance of an area that has adequate facilities. Some places they love it. Other places they just don't have the space to do it, and they're trying to come up with that. So it's something to think about when we're doing it here in Washington.
Yeah, we actually, we're lucky because we get to learn from Oregon system, which has greatly improved over the last, decade or so. It's all electronic. You have your card, you've got your green bags, you just basically go and put it into, it's actually a separate space from the grocery store. It's a setup sort of like, it's almost like a truck, the back of a truck, right, that you put your bottles into. And so, but we are definitely working on the convenience factor and making sure that there is a convenience ratio within the bill, and making sure that we're avoiding some of the pitfalls that we know Oregon has seen over, theirs has been in place for 50 years. So, but pretty much all of the top 10 recycled rates have the curbside extended producer, have a bottle bill, actually. It's not even the EPR. So we could really significantly increase if we have these two paired together. They're going to be two separate bills this year. So anyway, yeah.
I have a question about the charging producers for what they're sending into the state. And maybe this is a problem we would want to have, and this is probably decades out in the future, but it seems like it would incentivize producers to package less, right?
Right.
To
That's
use more recyclable
ultimately-
packaging and use less weight. But if we fund our recycling programs on something that is sort of incentivizing reduction, are we going to get into like the gas tax problem, whereas we have, we find those efficiencies and then we don't have the funds for the recycling program?
Yeah.
Have we seen that?
I
Is
mean,
that
I think
possible?
as as you wean yourself off of packaging, then you actually, can actually increase the kinds of materials that you take. So that's and we start off with a statewide list that is consistent across the state of what will be taken and used. And we've also put in the policies in place that require certain percentages of recycled material in products. So that's the other thing we're trying to do is we're never going to completely reduce waste, but we can definitely incentivize it being utilized in a circular fashion. Yeah, and while you're talking about the Climate Commitment Act is not actually a tax, but the other, just on energy, Puget Sound Energy, who provides our energy here, has come to us and asked that we give them some additional tools to help them address the fossil fuel emissions from the gas sector. And as you know, part of, from all the climate mitigation work and planning that you've done, that we need to move off of natural gas and really electrify our homes as well as our transportation systems. And so Puget Sound Energy, based on some of the policies that we've created, really recognize that they need to help low-income and medium-income folks move off the gas system, because as it sort of is happening voluntarily and organically, the more people move off it, the higher the rates are going to go. And plus, you can't put greenhouse gases into the air anymore for free, and so they have to pay on top of that. So they're really looking at how to be, how their company can start to move away from their gas sector and some of the tools that they need. So that is my bill, 1589. We did run it last year. We are planning on bringing that forward again and spending many hours working on that bill. So to make sure that this transition doesn't have a negative impact on low and moderate income families, and that we do it in an organized transitional way over the decades that we have to do this to 2050.
Great. Thank you. And I think that's
pretty fun.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So on the housing front, this is the second year of our biennium, so we're going to be working to address the housing issues that we did not accomplish last year. Last year they called it the Year of Housing. We did pass quite a few housing-related bills, but there were a number of them that we didn't get to. Those, I think we're going to see an emphasis on, like a transportation-oriented development bill, which would legalize higher densities around major transit areas. A bill that would legalize and streamline lot splitting by our fellow Representative Barkis. Really hoping that bill passes this year, because it will help homeownership opportunities, especially as we pass the middle housing bill, which legalizes middle housing statewide. We want to make sure that people have the ability to have that homeownership opportunity. There will be another bill that will legalize what we used to call single room occupancy. We now are referring to it as shared living spaces. So over the years, what used to be really small kind of micro unit apartments, we would refer to them as boarding houses, and they provided one of the only low income opportunities for people to live. And over the years and decades, they've been systematically zoned out. So there's an emphasis on kind of reigniting that type of housing again, in and making sure that it's legal to build those throughout the state. As you know, housing costs are extremely expensive for construction right now, and if you can have one unit with shared kitchen, shared bathrooms, you can start to see some reductions in cost. We need, over the course of the next 20 years, 500,000 homes at 0 to 50% AMI. And that's very difficult to build in the private sector. It does require some kind of subsidy from local government or state government or county government. And the way that we fund meaningfully affordable housing, Councilmember Cox, the chair of the Housing Committee, mentioned the Housing Trust Fund. That's how we fund that meaningfully affordable housing. But over the last 40 years, we've only created, not only, it's very good that we've done it, about 60,000 homes. And over the next 20, we need 500,000. And so we really need to be right. So that tells you the scale and the scope of the challenge that we have at hand. We also need 500,000 homes at 50% and above. So market rate housing is included. But when you try to get it at that 50%, cities are also concerned about that because you're being required to, in your zoning, because of House Bill 1220, when you do your comprehensive plans, you're having to account for how you're going to zone for that different income bands, including 0 to 30, 30 to 50, which is new. And so this, I think, will be a good opportunity to address that part of the law and also see some cost effectiveness. And we would, of course, have to continue and to increase our investment in the Housing Trust Fund. That would be a Representative Mia Gregerson bill. She's from Burien. I'm working on a bill that will hopefully create a transparency and accountability process for how we create housing at the city level across the state. That bill is still in the works. You'll be hearing from me about it, and I'm sure I'll hear from you. I'm also going to have a really quick technical fix bill on my middle housing bill from last year. There were just a couple things. No big changes, just a couple tweaks that are necessary to clarify. We are also going to see a continued focus on rent stabilization. We have members within our caucus and advocates that continue urging us to take action on some type of legislation that will allow for a cap on a % increase for rent. Last year we had two bills, a rent increase cap, and then also an anti-rent gouging bill. Neither of those bills moved through the legislature. We do continue hearing from renters, and I'm sure that you do as well. 50% of Washingtonians are renters, and in the year before August of this last August, 73,000 Washingtonians experienced a rent increase of greater than $500. So we're experiencing really challenging times for people, and I bring this forward because we're going to continue to see that focus, and it's going to be a part of the conversation around housing next year. And for the Housing Trust Fund investment, we had a REIT 2.0 bill last year. I forgot the actual technical name of it, but it was a bill that would have changed and created a more progressive, some would say a progressive taxation on REIT. I'm butchering the definition. I'm not on the finance committee. But next year, we're going to have, it's basically going to be an affordable housing real estate transfer surcharge that advocates hope will create about an extra $200 million a year that could be put directly into that housing trust fund, and then also help with housing for developmentally disabled individuals and permanent supportive housing. So that's just a brief synopsis of some of the housing stuff. Yeah. Thanks.
Go ahead.
So I gotta change my language, not boarding houses, but shared living spaces. What's the bill number on that? Do we have one yet?
I don't think I have the bill number yet, but I will find it and send it to you.
I would love that. Just the first thing that occurred to me, I was thinking about when I had my own shared living experiences, if anybody went to college and lived in a dorm or lived in a suite with people, not everybody continues to live in that type of environment, but I made some of the best friends of my life there. And I know that it doesn't work for everybody, but the Surgeon General also recently came out with a report that America is experiencing an endemic of loneliness. And it's actually having tremendous negative health impacts on people because we don't have a lot of the shared spaces we used to. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for connection, because not everybody pictures themselves as living in a shared living space like that, but there also might be an opportunity to build community around that kind of living space that we don't have now.
Mayor, may I respond?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think the bill's also going to address how you could potentially retrofit a current existing building to make it a shared living space and make that legal. Another, when we think about the misallocation or underutilization or efficiency of housing and resources, by one estimate, California had enough vacant rooms in homes to house all of their unhoused population. So we have folks now that, because of the housing market and the prices, they might live in a Rambler that's a 3-bedroom and it's just one elderly person, and they have 2 extra bedrooms, and in fact might benefit from having.
So that's a strategy that the City of Lacey is already implementing. We are doing a home share program. We work with
I thought it sounded familiar.
Yes, yeah, that was just, that came out of some conversations of like, geez, how can we get more housing? And we have a big senior population, and it's like, well, imagine if the seniors could room with seniors, and how can we marry this up? And so
I'm actually doing a bill that, so there's the low income property tax exemption for seniors, and they have to count the income that they receive from people renting spaces in their room against their income, so it lowers their exemption. So I am running a bill that would eliminate them having to report that income so that it doesn't dock their exemption. Yeah, that was actually brought to me by a constituent. So,
well, and this is something.
yeah, was it in? She's in Lacey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
maybe. Anyway.
This is something else I want the state to think about, and especially when you think about housing and what could be an unfunded mandate. Whatever the state comes up with for these housing strategies, you have to remember it's the cities and the counties that have to implement it, right? And the one of the things that we're seeing, and you talk to Thurston County, is they don't have the inspectors and the planners necessary to go through their big backlog of housing that they have, right? If it takes the county a year and a half to approve a plot because they just don't have the people to do it, then no matter what the state does, we're not going to build more housing. And so what I'd like you to think about is maybe some strategies where cities and the counties can apply to get some funding so we can staff up for this additional housing that we need, because that is something that we need, and it turns into an unfunded mandate, and you have this big backlog, and it'll never get built.
May I respond?
Yeah.
More than happy to help work towards getting you more resources to create more housing. We know that we are experiencing not enough planners because the changes that we have made to comp plan requirements for you all. We did put money aside for 3 different colleges to help you with your comprehensive planning process. If you have any topics that would help streamline and make building housing quicker, I am all ears and would love to talk with you about that.
We will hit you up with that.
If I can just add real quick, I do appreciate the legislature looking at the planning requirements, and actually providing grant funding to come down through Commerce for us to update, especially for this 2025 update. And just you mentioned, Representative Baby, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the work to identify what type of housing that various income stratas. Ironically, tonight, the next presentation is going to be the work on that, and you see that stuff coming forward, that we are going to be starting the baseline for our 2025 comprehensive plan update. So those are things that the legislature and you've all worked towards that we're now implementing and moving it forward. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. We'll see you. Okay. No, we're over, right? No? Anything? Okay, I think we're done with this agenda item, and we will move to our next item, which is our Growth Management Act housing allocations. Ryan and nope, not yet. We're gonna have to wait till we didn't put a time on when we have to go to the executive session.
Michael.
All right. So good evening again. Sorry about we thought we had a good hour to go until our agenda item was on, so we had to scramble in the room. Thanks for bearing with us on that. So tonight we have Allison Osterberg here with Thurston Regional Planning Council to provide some information on our housing need allocations, which you just heard came as a result of the state legislature passing House Bill 1220 in 2022 that requires the cities, when we're planning for housing, to plan on our housing allocations based on populations, and then taking that a little level further and planning for certain income levels as well. So the purpose of Allison's briefing tonight will be to go over that, and then I will talk about a little bit at the end of the presentation about next steps and how this information gets folded into our comprehensive plans. We also have Mark Daly here as well, Executive Director of Thurston Regional Planning Council. So with that, Allison?
Great. So good evening, council members. Allison Osterberg with Thurston Regional Planning Council. And I'm so pleased to be able to present on some work we did for the city of Lacey and other jurisdictions to help address this new legislation. And I just want to call out my colleague, Michael Ambrosi, who did the bulk of the work on this project. He is ill and wasn't able to be here, and so I'm standing in his stead. And he's really the brains behind the analysis and the numbers that are here and coming up with an elegant way to do this really important work. So just want to, if I don't know the answer, Michael can probably get back to you about it. So we couldn't have had a better lead-in introduction to the work that we're presenting. In 2021, the legislature passed a number of changes to the Growth Management Act that had to do with increased new requirements in housing elements for jurisdictions that you'll have to address as part of your periodic update. And one of the changes to that law is that jurisdictions must now plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population. There were already elements around planning for housing affordability, but the real difference in the legislation that was passed is that we have to look at numbers. And we have to look at not just housing that's affordable generally, but we're looking at really specific income levels. And that's what this work is about. What we know is that we're not starting from zero in the city of Lacey or in our region or statewide. There's a lot of work that has already been done around coming up with policies, understanding the context of housing affordability in our community. That is already discussed in our countywide planning policies, in our comprehensive plans, in housing action plans, in the homeless crisis response plan. All of these planning efforts have thought through and contain policies that promote housing for a range of incomes. And so this work, what it does beyond that is really driving down into getting a better understanding of quantifying what the housing need is for different income types. Who are we planning for as part of this effort? The legislation, the guidance that came out from the State Department of Commerce on how to do the requirements is really specific about how we break down those income levels. And so we're looking at different brackets of area median income up to, we have to plan for 0 to 30% AMI, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, and 100 to 120 of area median income. We also have to look at what the need is going to be in our community for emergency shelter, so shelter beds, emergency housing, and permanent supportive housing. But as part of this, we also have we also look at the total housing need in our community. And so you will see represented in the numbers that we have the need for housing for folks who have higher incomes in our community. We try to indicate that as the remainder. It's still a lot of folks in our community, and one of the messages from this is that that's not the focus of what we're planning for that housing need as part of these requirements, but the message is still there that we will need housing for all income types, and that includes folks at all income levels.
Allison, I have a quick question about these numbers. So we're getting really granular into the different levels of income. Are these statewide numbers, or are they adjusted because the profile showed us that there's certain cost of living differences in different cities in Washington?
So these equivalent household incomes are for Thurston County as a whole. They're not, we do have different
Thurston County, there's
different
some
incomes for
differences.
Thurston County jurisdictions, but for this effort, we looked at Thurston County as a whole. What we know, I mean, no, this is no surprise to folks around this table. The need for housing in our community is really great. And so this slide is showing the existing housing stock across Thurston County entirely, broken out into those different income brackets. So countywide, we have around 121,000 homes that are available as of 2020. And you can see the bulk of our housing stock is in that 50 to 80% in kind of those central bars. And there's less in the lowest income brackets. And there's really very little permanent supportive housing. And with all the work that's been done locally, really important, really good, but the need is there. And what does that need? Part of the numbers that we get from Commerce through this process breaks out what the need is when we look ahead over the next 20 years at these different income brackets, what the need for housing will be. It's important to remember that these are not targets. What this effort is really trying to show is that with the population growth that we are expecting in our region, people in our community are going to be at different income levels, and they will need housing at these different levels. And the charge really in this legislation is for jurisdictions to really grapple with the fact that there will be folks needing housing at these lower income levels especially. And as you can see, the biggest gaps where we have the most ground to cover are in some permanent supportive housing and some of the lower income categories. So those numbers that I just showed come from the current housing allocations that are developed countywide by Thurston Regional Planning Council, and then the breakouts by income level are what were provided to us by the State Department of Commerce, and that's not something that we have discretion over as part of this process. But what we do have discretion over is how we allocate that countywide amount, the housing need across our jurisdictions. And so the guidance from Commerce said that process needs to be multi-jurisdictional and collaborative. And the jurisdictions, the one real requirement we have is that the numbers need to total up to that total need. That countywide need that we just showed by income bracket, we can't come up with different numbers for that. We need to meet that countywide need. What we have discretion over is deciding how that housing need is allocated across our different communities. So this is a brand new challenge to be dealt with as part of the comprehensive plan this year, and to deal with it, planning managers and staff from Thurston County and the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Yelm contracted with Thurston Regional Planning Council to look through the guidance from Commerce, to look at different methods for allocating that housing need that were provided by the Department of Commerce, and also by jurisdictions that have a slightly, that are ahead of us in the comp plan cycle and have already tackled this. We worked with those entities and then also invited our smaller jurisdictions, Rainier, Tenino, and Bicota to participate. And the goal was to reach consensus on a preferred allocation method for how to allocate that need across our jurisdictions. And so we did that. We met a number of times, looked through the different options, weighed through the different ways we could split these numbers, and jurisdictions did come to consensus around that. So at this step, we are presenting that preferred allocation method to all of the jurisdictions, and last evening, we presented to the Regional Housing Council. The recommendation from that staff work group is that these allocations be approved, be adopted by Thurston Regional Planning Council and early next year, and that they be the basis for jurisdictions to use, all jurisdictions to use in their comprehensive plans going forward. And the link there is that because TRPC, we already do population allocations for small jurisdictions. This kind of builds on that work, is consistent with all that work, and it's a good regional body to kind of provide a landing place for that and provide some support for you all going into your comp plan updates. But then the work really, this is a small piece of all the work that will need to happen in the comp plan updates, and jurisdictions will need to document those allocations in their housing elements and show that the policies in the housing elements are removing barriers that will enable jurisdictions to address the housing need that's identified. Something we talked about in that group a lot and that came up is that jurisdictions do not, for the most part, they're not building this housing. The private sector, for the most part, is building housing. And so the charge for jurisdictions is to understand the need in the community and see what policies and programs and procedures they can put in place to help enable, make the conditions on the ground so that those can be achieved. As we were having that discussion, those discussions, the staff work group, where we started was a discussion about what are our shared values that should guide how low-income housing is and affordable housing is allocated across our community. And the three values we landed on is that everyone agreed that this allocation method should be fair. And by fair, the group meant that low-income housing should be distributed across all our jurisdictions, shouldn't just be concentrated in one or two jurisdictions. There will be people at all income levels in all our jurisdictions, and they will need places to live. At the same time, we want to recognize that there are differences among our jurisdictions in their existing housing stock and their capacity for housing. And so we want to recognize that not everyone's starting from the same place. We wanted to make sure that the allocation method was clear, that it would be relatively easy to communicate to the public and elected officials, and easy for us to replicate in the future when we need to do it again, which we likely will need to do. And folks also wanted to make sure that it was, the method we used was cooperative, that it built on the existing structures that we already use regionally through our regional housing council, through our countywide planning policies. And most importantly, we needed a method that everyone agreed on and that everyone had buy-in to and felt like, although the numbers, as you'll see, are a lot, everyone's in the same boat with doing that. And we were able to get there. So I'm just going to go, this is a really simplified example to explain how the methodologies work. So we have a very simple county. It has two communities within it. And within those communities, each of them have some orange houses and some blue houses, but not the same distribution of those different types of housing currently. And we know that in the future, across the county, we'll need 4 more blue houses and 4 more orange houses. And so the question is, how many of them should go into each jurisdiction? As I mentioned, Commerce provided 2 methods that jurisdictions could choose to use. Method A looked at just that future need for housing and said we're going to split it equally between everyone gets the same equal share. We're not going to look at the existing housing on the ground. We're only going to look at future housing, and we're going to split it equally. Very easy to communicate, easy to understand, and this was the preferred method that's being used by Pierce County and Kitsap County because it especially for the accelerated timelines that those communities were on, it was the easiest methodology for them to use. Method B has a different philosophy. It says that you should also consider the existing housing stock on the ground. Some communities already have a lot of affordable housing and some have less. And so what you want to have is an equal share in each jurisdiction looking at the total housing stock instead of just the future stock. And there should be some credit for jurisdictions that already have more affordable housing. So method B, philosophically, I think a lot of jurisdictions were interested in this method, but practically, something about the way Commerce did the method, it can be a little confusing. For some jurisdictions, it results in negative allocations at some income types. It's just harder to explain, and so no jurisdictions have opted to use method B. But Commerce does also allow jurisdictions to take a different approach and come up with their own justification. So King County and Snohomish County have done a hybrid method, one that combines kind of the best of both worlds, methods A and B, and ultimately that's what our staff work group decided on doing. They wanted to do a hybrid method that was most similar to Snohomish County, the approach that Snohomish County has taken. And so what that allocation method looks like is that it's based on method A. It starts with that equal share of new housing units across the jurisdictions. But it gives some credit to jurisdictions that have currently a disproportionate share of low-income housing when you compare them. But it doesn't totally take that into account. It just adjusts the numbers then so that we get to the totals. We can meet the countywide need, and we can meet the individual jurisdiction projections that we already have. And it's relatively easy for us to replicate in the future. We don't need to go find some new data or do any different kind of analysis to do it, which is what King County's method would have required. And so we got consensus agreement from all the members of our staff work group, representing all the jurisdictions, that this method best represented those values that they had decided on. It was found to be the most fair, the most clear to communicate, and cooperative, the best combination of those values. So I know what you really want to know is, what does this mean for Lacey? So to walk you through that, these are the housing supply in Lacey, starting with what we have on the ground right now in the city and in the UGA. That's 2020 housing supply. And then the projected 2020 to 2045 housing need in the future. And these aren't new numbers. These are already numbers that are developed through TRPC's projections. And we look at how that housing on the ground today is broken out. The top bar you can see is how Lacey's current housing stock is broken out by those different income brackets and how that compares to countywide. So some differences in Lacey compared to countywide. And then looking ahead to the housing need, that projected housing need, here's what it looks like when it's broken out by income for Lacey compared to the county. Or countywide, that's not the county, it's just all the jurisdictions altogether. So another way to look at it is to show how that housing, this is the allocation that's being presented, how that housing need is being distributed across all the communities in Thurston County using this methodology. This combines all of the income levels from 0 to 50% area median income. And so you can see that this is just the new housing need, 2020 to 2045. And so the largest amount of housing units would be in the city of Olympia, followed closely by the city of Lacey, and then smaller amounts in Tumwater and Yelm, and then relatively smaller amounts of that more affordable lower income housing in smaller communities in the rural area. Yelm does have a UGA, but Yelm's UGA is, it works differently from the way it works for the city of Lacey. It's more like a reserve area, so it's zoned at pretty low density until they annex. So I think from here I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, but the important thing to know is this is just one piece of a lot of work that's happened and is continuing to happen.
Yep, great. Thanks, Allison. So, this is, I guess, kind of telling us what we already knew, which is we need more housing everywhere, right, at all income levels. So this process, that's been my takeaway, is more of everything everywhere. And this isn't the beginning of our housing-related initiatives, especially to get more affordable housing, and get more housing at all income levels. So I just wanted to remind the council with this slide that, you know, we've done a lot of efforts over the last number of years on a number of different initiatives. So permit streamlining, specifically our pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program has been looking at trying to, how do we make, you know, the barrier to entry for an accessory dwelling unit much less than it typically would. Our zoning changes, our low-density zone consolidation, which allows a duplex or a triplex on every lot in Lacey. The expansion of our fee waiver program to the private sector. So this was something that was previously only available to the nonprofit sector building affordable housing. Now it's available to the private sector as well. And extension of the multifamily tax exemption in Lacey Midtown through 2034. But we still have more to come. One of the things that I'll mention here at the outset is that we have our countywide planning policies, which sets forth the framework on how we plan throughout all our jurisdictions in Thurston County. And those countywide planning policies really don't have a lot in them related to housing. It really is on, you know, how do we deal with our joint planning and our urban growth areas and the rural areas and those kinds of things, and maybe some environmental characteristics, but it doesn't have a lot in terms of housing. And so I think to come, we will be continuing this kind of regionally at a higher level on what do we do and how do we incorporate some of this work into our countywide planning policies. Getting down to a more finer grain element, our housing element, of our comprehensive plan is going to be a big part of that as well. As Allison mentioned, you know, we'll be looking at our whole suite of policies and regulations to make sure that we're you know, able to meet these housing projections, and identifying and implementing our policies and regulations related to racially disparate impacts, displacement, and inclusion in housing, which is a new legislative requirement as well. As well, we'll also be working on a future project to look at our land capacity related to these housing allocation numbers. So do we have enough appropriately zoned land to accommodate for all the housing in the first place? I think that's an important question to be answered. So more to come soon on those two topics specifically. We also have some additional mandates, and I'm glad that that was brought up previously with the legislature, because I think they tend to forget sometimes that we still haven't completed the work that they set out for us last year before they start working on additional. So we are working on some middle housing requirements. That was House Bill 1110 passed last session, which requires up to 4 dwelling units per lot if one of those units is affordable. So as I mentioned, we already allow duplexes and triplexes. This can allow up to a 4-plex if one of those lots is affordable. And that's actually a requirement. We're required to do that. So we got a grant from the Department of Commerce to do more work on the middle housing front in the coming about year and a half.
That's 4 units of what would have been a single family home lot.
Correct, yes. And then as well, accessory dwelling units. So that was House Bill 1337. So we already have a fairly liberal accessory dwelling unit policy in Lacey and have for a number of years. This goes even a step further than what Lacey's had on the books. Number one, it would go from allowing a maximum or requiring a maximum of 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot to going to 2 accessory dwelling units per lot. We also can't regulate the size below 1,000 square feet. So right now we say, you know, based on the size of the house, you can have a certain, of the size of the main dwelling, you can have a certain size accessory dwelling unit. That standard would go away and basically state that we can't require a accessory dwelling unit to be less than 1,000 square feet. And as well, a unit lot subdivision provision of the code is needed that would allow sales of the accessory dwelling unit. So it would be a way to essentially condominiumize the accessory dwelling unit to be able to be sold separately from the lot or the main house.
That's tough, because right now we don't require them to have separate meters, and they can hook up to this. How do we do that?
Correct. So it creates some.
I want to buy one of those and make the other person have to pay for my utilities.
It comes down to, then you have to set the condominium association, common maintenance, utilities, or create a new meter drop. Yeah.
The 2 units have become a condo.
And then, of course, if you do that, then you got to go to the state auditor's office to file everything and have that review.
Egress. Yeah, Ryan, do we, as a city, do we have a minimum lot size that we can, for building a residential?
We do. It depends on the zone. So we have essentially 3 different residential zones, a low, moderate, and high-density residential. As you go from low to high, low would be the largest minimum lot size, to high would be actually the smallest minimum lot size per unit. So with that,
But even in that high density then, so what currently, whatever that is, whatever that square footage is for a minimum lot size, now you can put 4 units on that lot that would have been 1 unit in the next.
correct. Yes, regardless of density requirements or lot size, you would be able to put up to 4 units on that lot. Correct.
But your performance standard would still apply, your setbacks, your height, your compatibility, those pieces. So basically, you could have a multi-story. Yep.
Yes.
You can do it.
Yep.
I saw on the, on Marvin Road out towards 41st, I see a new duplex going up. And it looked like the house had been there for a long time, and then recently they subdivided it and and they have a duplex under construction at this point in time. So it appears as though people are already taking advantage of some of this as you know.
Yeah, and it's going to be, and what we've shown, when we did go through the low-density zone consolidation, the most that are going to take advantage of it, especially with accessory dwelling units and additional units on a lot, will be the bigger lots, usually in older parts of town that are connected to utilities, city sewer especially, and then aren't part of homeowners associations. So to bring this full circle on the homeowners association discussion, is a lot of homeowners associations prohibit anything other than single-family residential. So you can kind of consider that most anything built after about 1990 in Lacey is not likely to have an accessory dwelling unit or be converted to something like a duplex or triplex because their CCNRs likely prohibit that. Moving forward, I think the legislature is making some adjustments that says in future new developments, CCNRs can't prohibit those from coming into the neighborhoods. But that's not a retroactive proposition. It's only for new development created after a certain date.
To meet those requirements, though, will they at some point have to make that retroactive? I mean, is there enough, when you look at the numbers,
Yeah.
right, of what they're saying needs to be built, is there enough land in Lacey to build that requires the number of homes needed without doing something in those HOAs?
How much of our housing is in HOAs in Lacey?
Everything that's newer, certainly.
Yeah.
Majority of our housings are in some level HOAs. Some of those are more active than others. Some are older neighborhoods that the HOAs are a little bit more, much less active but that's one of the things I think the state delegation referred to is that they're still going to go back and look at the HOAs. And that's a bigger challenge for them to figure out how you make something retroactive because then you got some other, there's going to be a lot of challenges to that if that is enacted. They work through yet.
I do just want to point out, if you're looking at Lacey's and our allocations, there's way more allocated to our urban growth area than is to the city. And this is why I keep talking about, we have the largest urban growth area of any jurisdiction in Thurston County, and we need to do something about, because there's no way that the county can meet any of these requirements under the current conditions. Right? They don't have the staff, they don't have the ability to do it. And that's why I went back to talking to, yeah, right? I mean, it's impossible to build in our urban growth area. And as long as the county continues to be in charge of permitting, we will not meet any of this in our urban growth area. So that's a big deal. Enough said. Everyone knows where I stand on that.
I don't know if this is their first time hearing about that.
Is there any other discussion?
That's all we had.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks.
Then we'll go on to reserve designation. Troy. I tried to kick you to a different meeting, but I realize this is coming before us next week, so I guess we have to do it.
Yes, well, thank you for remembering that. All right, well, welcome to our annual discussion on reserve designations. This is a accounting requirement, but I think more important, it's another mechanism for the council to communicate community priorities through our financial statements. So I'll jump right in. So just a real quick reminder of what this Governmental Accounting Standards Board statement requires is we basically classify our fund balance into 5 different categories, and I'll run through those really quickly. The first is non-spendable. These are fund balances that actually aren't in cash form, so you can't really spend it. So this includes inventories and receivables. The next is restricted. These are fund balances that have constraints for a specific purpose. It's usually by an external legal source. So think contract, state constitution, state legislation, that type of thing. And really what we're here to talk about tonight are the committed reserves. These are fund balances that are constrained by the highest level of decision-making by a local government. So that would be you, the city council. And you have typically adopted these committed reserves by ordinance, and we would expect the same next week's meeting. We'll talk just briefly about this 4th category. These are assigned reserves. It's basically the same thing as a committed reserve, but this is operationally acts a little more flexible. So in the past, the city council has delegated the city manager and finance director as having authority to designate these reserves. This allows us mid-year to identify different priorities and to make sure that those cash balances are indeed designated for that purpose. And then the final category defined by this standard is unassigned. This is basically everything else. Probably the most common fund balance you see here are the 2-month operating reserves that the council has adopted by policy. So we'll start talking first about what our cash balances are. We use or have used in the past the last known fund balance that isn't currently moving. So that would be the year-end 2022. Of course, we haven't finished 2023 yet. In some sense, we have another 2 months of activity, even though we're halfway through December. So a good example is sales tax. We won't actually know the final sales tax numbers until the end of February. So you can see that we had $242.6 million at the end of 2022, so very healthy reserves. These are 6 broad categories for all of our funds. We do have 29 different funds in which we track various cash and activities. I will note that in your proposed 2024 budget, we do have about just under $71 million of reserves in the budget, which helps us balance the budget. You know, I hope we don't spend that much in reserves, but we are going to spend more than we have in the past just because of the police station. So I'll run through each individual category. I won't go through every detail, but here's your general fund. It's made up of 6 different funds. The general fund cash balance at the end of 2022 was just over $73 million. I do have a couple funds highlighted there in red. The current expense fund at $60.3 million. This is, of course, the fund that provides most of the services our citizens identify with: police, parks, administrative, city council, of course. We are going to transfer out just under $28 million of this balance into the building fund for the police station, as well as about $5.4 million for the Great Cuyo Park Phase 1A construction. The other fund I want to highlight is criminal justice, just under $2.2 million. We are going to transfer out $1.6 million from this balance into the building fund for the police station.
So, Troy, these are the latest numbers we have. We don't have like a half year where we're at halfway through the year. I mean, I know you don't have up to date, but I mean, you're talking about cash balance in the last year, and here we are almost at the end of this year. I mean, I know we have 2 more months, but we should have a better idea where cash balances are, say, as of June 31st, right? Or June 30th.
It's a little difficult just because we have, we have a modified accrual-based accounting, which there's a lot of adjustments that actually happened right up until May. That doesn't impact cash, but it does impact the fund balance. So let me give you an example. We have year-end transfers that we have not completed yet. That's about $8.6 million in, we'll call it expenditures. I mean, we're moving from this current expense fund into a capital fund. So there's a lot of moving parts. It makes it a little difficult. I'll say it's kind of a hard question to answer. So we're going to be using a lot of reserves for the police station, Great Cougar Park. But at the same time, I think because of, say, vacancies, we've averaged about 30 vacancies throughout the year. That ends up being a savings, of course, and we have revenues that are coming in higher than projected. So we're going to be adding cash, but spending
Less.
Reserves.
Yeah.
So that's all really difficult to kind of pinpoint in terms of cash. I just, I wouldn't advise the council to commit to reserves that we actually don't have in hand, and that's the main point.
Sure.
And that's
But
where
we do have more than this in hand. We just don't know how much.
Correct. And that's where the assigned reserves come into play. So if the council chooses to delegate that to the city manager and finance director, we will be able to still designate reserves. It won't be quite as strong as a council committed reserve, but it's still a very strong message that I think expresses the intent of the council.
Do we currently, as all these different funds go throughout the year, say we're above or below, do the balance switch over from year to year and keep them assigned? So, for example, capital equipment, this is how much we have in cash. But say we don't spend it all, and so it's a higher. Do we assign it back to capital equipment automatically, or is it not assigned until the following year's budget when we see what that actual number is?
Sure. No,
because I'd feel a lot better if it was just, if we kept it assigned, and then we can sort of reconcile it later, right, in the budget process.
Right. So the money, the funds will stay within that fund. So that 4.6. Let's say that we underspend our budget by $1 million.
Yeah.
That number is going to be 5.6 million at the end of 2023. At
Is
that
it-
point, these committed reserves that we hope the council will take action on next week, those are set in stone until the council actually takes an action to undo that. The assigned reserves, what we've typically done is when we actually feel the number isn't moving, that's when the city manager and finance director assign additional reserves that will be reported on the face of the financial statements. So it all stays in the fund. I hope that gives you assurance that we're going to match your priorities.
So that's all I was looking for.
Great, sorry. Looking at the utility funds, about $85.2 million in total in all these various funds. Of course, these revenues must be used for utility purposes, so they're not available for commitment necessarily. I mean, they're already reserved for these specific purposes. We do have the capital funds highlighted. There are significant cash balances there. You can see 34 million for water, 16.7 for wastewater, just over 6 million for stormwater. But we have very significant capital improvement programs starting in 2024. As an example, the water capital improvement plan is over $38 million, 17 million for wastewater, and just about 5.5 for stormwater. So we're well positioned, but we are definitely in a position where we may be bringing those balances down as well. And this is probably a good time. I didn't have a chance to thank council publicly for adopting multi-year rates, but this is why we approve multi-year rates. It gives us assurance that some of this cash is going to be replenished without having to think about and having to council consider those rates year in and year out.
What is the debt in those three last funds? I didn't know we had any debt.
We do have revenue bond debt. That's 2013. We issued that debt for water and stormwater projects. So those balances, and then we have a ULID debt for wastewater.
I knew the ULID.
So that's for Tango out. So
Yes.
when we issue debt, we typically have to have a reserve based on the bond covenants. And that's typically equal to, at a minimum, 1 year's annual debt service payments. So that's basically what that represents, is in both water and wastewater, those are our bond reserve.
2013, what did we do in 2013?
Ooh. One of the big projects was Chambers Lake Stormwater Facility.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And there was probably 5 water projects. Oh, that's an unfair question. I can't remember either. But the big one was Chambers Lake.
Yeah. Come on.
I'll look it up real quick.
No, that's all right. I'm just like, I think, okay, I remember that. I'm just,
Are these funds, are these interest-bearing?
I'm sorry, David Cameron?
These funds, are they interest-bearing, or any of these accounts?
They all
Interest-bearing
are.
accounts? They all are.
We
Because
do,
our-
we have, our investments, we have, advisory services, that we have the majority of our funds invested in, so, and we're earning, extremely high rates at this point. Just
Aren't we
because
all?
of-
But it doesn't ever show well, I won't say ever, the interest income that we earn on these dollars.
Right, this is the cash side, so we see the interest revenue, interest on the revenue side, so, yeah.
and the interest that we earn goes back into the funds, right?
Correct, so.
The
each
specific
one
fund
of
that
these,
gain that interest?
We pull all of our investments
Yes.
into one, but yes, we do distribute based on these balances.
Yeah.
Our special revenue funds, you could see the 6 funds here. The 2 I'd like to highlight is arterial streets and the transportation improvement fund. Arterial streets, just under 43 million. We have committed 18 million of that 42 or 43 million for the police station. That's from the real estate excise tax. On the transportation improvement, this is basically the TBD, Transportation Benefit District. Just like I said, under 5.2 million. We are going to spend about 5.3 next year, so I'm glad we have those reserves. We've been able to invest a little bit more in the maintenance and of our street and sidewalk infrastructure.
Last year, we were at,
So stacks must be doing pretty good if we're going to 5.3 next year, right?
last year, we were at 220 as a reserve total, right? 220 last year. So have we grown by that much over the
No,
12-month
we've actually
period?
brought that down. It was, I want to say it's in the $6.5 million range, so we've definitely adjusted, and we've been able to do a lot more out there in terms of street preservation. Capital project funds, we have building and parks and open space. The building fund, of course, is where the police station expenditures are going to occur. We did previously transfer money into that fund. Just an example how quickly the expenditures are going to happen. We've basically spent that $6 million, and the year-end transfers that I alluded to in one of my responses is going to go right back into that fund to help replenish that.
So, I know, why do we still have money in CDBG? It's only 32,000, wherever it was, but shouldn't we have spent all that money?
Yeah, there's.
Interest left over, yeah. Transfers.
So we made interest off the CDBG dollars and we put it back into this fund?
Correct. Same. Right.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize we could do that.
Our 2 debt funds, this is where we both receive bond proceeds and transfer out into generally our capital funds. We've talked about this LID fund, Fund 202, for a couple of years. These are funds that we have a lot of flexibility, so it's just something for the council to keep in mind as it thinks about other priorities. We've accumulated these funds, and we've done the legal analysis on this, and they can be spent for any general purpose.
So this is the money that we've made off of the LID debt.
Correct. So when we actually establish a local improvement district, the assessments happen before we issue debt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way the law works. In some cases, for Lacey, we didn't actually issue debt. We paid cash, or we
That's
found.
right.
In some cases, and we've also used Public Works Trust Fund loans, which are a much lower interest rate. But since these are established ahead of issuing debt, there is a difference in terms of how much interest is paid and how much is collected, so.
So is that LID debt, is there any obligation at all in the LID debt at this point?
There is not, so, yeah, there's,
That whole almost $4 million is available for any.
Anything we would choose? Wow.
yeah, so there's a lot of
That's nice.
opportunity there for us.
And same with the GO bond, the GO bonds?
Yep, and we actually,
No,
yeah,
but,
we actually used about 315,000 from that fund to help fund the design of the police station. You might, that
oh,
was
that's right. I was, yeah.
18 months ago or
Yep, yep.
6 months, but recently.
I knew we used reserves, I just didn't know where we got it from.
Yep, that, yeah, that was. And then the last two funds are internal service funds, equipment rental, which is primarily vehicles and other heavy equipment, and information management services, which is our computers and networks. These are treated like businesses, but the balances you're seeing here are for replacement of those pieces of equipment. So each year from each department, we collect replacement dollars, and they go into those funds so we could make those replacements when they come due. Why the mouse isn't working there. So these are the
So, you want to know what projects we spent money on?
Yeah.
Wow, nice filler.
So, yeah, the reclaimed water infiltration facility
Yeah.
in Woodland Creek.
Yeah, yeah.
As Troy said, Chamber Lake stormwater facility.
Chamber Lake,
HVAC water treatment, we did some work over there. And then the big Skokomish water line replacement project.
Oh, that's Skokomish, okay, yeah.
That was the 6-inch.
Oh, that would have
No.
been, gee, 10, probably 10 or so.
Didn't remember all those off the top of your head, huh?
I have a hard time remembering last week.
Done a few projects since then.
we have. So, yes,
Revenue bonds for that.
that was that must have been an energy savings hint for me to move along. So I'll run through the proposed designations for the council. A lot of these haven't changed from what was designated last year, so I'll just highlight the changes going forward. And to give you a little, the conversion there, the red are reserves that we're actually spending this year, and the green are additions to our committed reserves, or what we'll be proposing to you. So for budget policy implementation, that $185,000 basically brings us back to the $3 million reserve that we've traditionally kept, just, for ebbs and flows of the budget when we just need to make a balancing effort. Strategic, under economic development, we have strategic investment. We have historically tried to keep $2.5 million in that reserve, so that's simply that action. And I'll point out to council that next year we do plan on really taking a kind of a deep dive on strategic initiatives, kind of concentrating on, workforce enhancements and other concepts. So, we'll see that in 2024. At the bottom there, you see the McKinney House, $50,000. That's actually in the 2024 budget. That includes a parcel assessment and a wetland delineation report for next year. So moving forward on that. Under social services, you see mental and social health services outreach. That's our MOT works hand in hand with our police department. The combination of those two reserves is going to be $450,000, which is basically 2 years operations of that team. The rapid response team, $500,000. That is our cleanup team. That's also equal to 2 years operations for that team. Under public safety reserves, obviously we have significant reserves set aside for the police station, so about almost $14 million we're asking the council to commit. Succession planning, I will point out, we are spending that at about $750,000 per year. That's funding 4 positions. And then you have the law enforcement record system there at the bottom. In Parks, Culture, and Recreation, the changes there you're seeing in Parks comp plan priorities, we've been spending that, for various initiatives. The long-term financial plan for the RAC, $200,000. We're going to use the last of that subsidy next year in 2024. And then you have Great Cuyo Park implementation. We're asking that the council commit just under $5.5 million. That's the latest estimate on the construction for that phase. No change here for buildings and capital equipment replacement and other priorities, which at this point consists of energy conservation projects. So everything's carrying over as is. Switching to some of our other funds, criminal justice, I put a question mark there just to let the council know that that $1.6 million I mentioned earlier, we may not transfer that this year. We really just kind of need to see where we're at in terms of expenditures at year end, but we're trying to prioritize spending the ARPA dollars. So it really just depends where expenditures end, whether we need that transfer or not. If we don't transfer it, we'll have city manager and finance director assign those for that same purpose for the new police station. Under community buildings fund, we have
those ARPA dollars, for all intents and purposes, been obligated? We haven't really obligated them yet, right?
We have not.
Them?
So to obligate them, you need a contract in place. So your action next week will allow us to obligate those funds in March. That'll be our next reporting to U.S. Treasury is at the end of March. So once we have a contract that will, and we report those in March, that will obligate those funds.
Okay.
So
need to obligate those as soon as possible, obviously.
Yep, and we have plenty of time, but I understand the urgency, for sure. Under community buildings, we've been spending both of those reserves throughout the last couple of years. We just have aging facilities, but that's why we have those reserves in place. Under the RAC, no change. We're continuing to want to commit funds for the field replacement. Looking at the city street fund, very similar. We have been replacing equipment throughout the years. I think the most significant new addition here is there's an extra $500,000 we would like the council to commit for the college and 7th Roundabout project. Capital equipment fund, again, we have just aging equipment, so we've been replacing equipment, but other than that, no changes being proposed for next year. Arterial street fund, of course, you'll recognize the 2 reserves, one $18 million for the police station, $18 million for just transportation improvement plan priorities, but there's an extra $3 million we would like to add to the transportation side of that. Lodging tax, we don't really take action on that just because of state code. It's just the way that budget is operated, but we do assign reserves and there's no change there. The building improvement fund, no change, except I will note that under public art, that is an increase. We're
still doing $1 a population?
Yep, that's exactly what the addition is. So that's 59,420, 430, can't remember, about 59,000 is being added to that reserve.
Do we have plans to actually use some of that fund? That's starting to get up there. It's time for some more Eagles or whatever.
We are working on an art plan.
It's getting late, see? It's getting late.
We are working on an art plan, so yes, we will.
Great.
We will move forward there. And no other changes throughout both the building fund and the Parks and Open Space Fund. Under the Regional Athletic Complex, no change as well. Just as a reminder to the council, this is where we bring in our public facility districts monies. So I think, I hope that, what I just went through matches, the council priorities. There wasn't a lot of change just because all of our available cash, for the most part, is going to the police station. But I do want to kind of walk through some other community priorities just to make sure we're still in sync with the city council. This list is going to look very familiar. There was a lot of discussion with our state legislators on some of these. So there's a combination, this list is a combination of projects that don't have any funding identified and projects that have partial funding and some that we are looking at other opportunities like grants and asks of from our friends at the state. So here's a list of projects that we hope we've identified for the council that will have future discussions. I'll start with the capital facilities plan. So back in September, the city council got to see a draft plan that had about $99 million of capital facility improvements. And those included, of course, the City Hall renovation that you see there at the top of the list, $5.2 million. It also included $5 million for the Joint Animal Services building, which would be 25% of the estimated cost of that facility. And then if you go down near the bottom, you see the draft capital facility plan, $71 million, and that includes the Operations Center for Public Works, the White House, and the Senior Center. What's not on this list is the museum. I think that was about $18 million.
Down from that.
At this point, we're looking at the community and fundraising for that project, but it's certainly out there, but it's not in terms of a funding mechanism at this point for the city. So those are really big ticket items that we need to be mindful of as we kind of think forward. Also on here is the College Street and 7th Avenue roundabout. The long list I went through had $1.3 million of general fund monies committed. The remainder of the funding for that project will come from that $21 million arterial street reserve. We had a lot of discussion about the rack LED light upgrade, $2.1 million, and we're obviously looking for opportunities there for either grants or help from the state capital budget. We have the rack phase 3 on there. We haven't gone through that study yet. And of course, the extension of the public facility district sales tax is going to go a long ways there. But just to give the council some perspective, back in 2005 when we did phase 2, and we borrowed about $4.8 million for that. When we look at that extension of that sales tax, that's roughly the same amount. And if we think about what inflation has done to construction over the last 20 years, I think that $4.7 million doesn't look quite as large as it did back then. So, it's something for us to think about in terms of future reserves. The vacant police station, we are, in 2 years, we're going to vacate that building. No specific plans yet, but we know that's going to be an investment one way or another, whether it's demolition, even to get it to the stage that we can mothball is going to cost some money. So we need to be mindful of that. Of course, we saw, from the legislative discussion, the Young Child and Family Center, that's a to be determined number as well. And then at the bottom, we have social service regional partnerships and energy conservation projects. Those are 2 areas that the council has, definitely committed and been proponents of. And, that's just for us at the staff level to think about as we move forward in terms of identifying those for the council. So this is the long list of things that we still need to think about. We'll still look at opportunities, but these are areas that from the staff level we'll be mindful of as we move forward.
I mean, you brought up the museum, and I think we need to start thinking about rollover reserves, and do we set aside a portion, somehow, a portion of those reserves into a fund so we can get to a point, at some point, where we can get the museum built? Even if you look at the strategy to build a museum, the community with the Lacey Community Foundation, they're looking to raise like around $3 million. The city is looking through other, grants, other opportunity to raise the rest. But man, we're never gonna, we've been talking about this museum for, over 15 years. And we're just never gonna get there if we just talk about it at some sort of future hope we get there, when we're spending dollars on a lot of other things that hasn't been a priority for this council nearly as long as our museum and cultural center has. So I just, I would love to see the museum get some progress. I don't think it's fair to put all on the foundation to figure that out, and if we don't start setting some money aside in reserves, even if it takes a period of time, as long as we know we're working towards it to get actually built, I think that should be a priority for this council.
Sure. I do want to point out we have $500,000 there. We call it the 5700 property. Probably needs to be updated, but I mean, that's a start. I think that's a really good discussion for the council later, early next year. I guess I said that backwards, but, the council retreat's going to focus on these very issues, developing council priorities and trying to identify that funding. I saw the city manager make a note, so, we'll certainly make sure that, as the council moves forward through its retreat process.
Well, that's part of that council conversation is how do we do this and what's the strategy? It's going to be a multi-year strategy to get there because of just limited resources, income coming in to be able to set aside.
That's fine, as long as there's some strategy to get there. I haven't seen the strategy to get there yet, so I would like to see it.
For the retreat yet? Or
No.
I initially had a date about the end of January, but our facilitator was not available, so I need to work on another date, and that's the goal for the next couple of weeks.
Right now.
I still want to hold that in case we need it, even if we need to just do a preliminary just with us without a facilitator, but I did want to kind of wait and see what I can do in terms of how far out we might be in February.
How could I possibly talk to anyone without a facilitator?
What's that?
Just kidding.
No.
I had an actual budget-related question or maybe a comment, and I recognize that I'm just piling on to a list of unfunded priorities that we want to find funding for in the future, but something that I think is not on this list, but I'd like for us to talk about at the retreat is allocating funding to be in a position to acquire property when property comes available if we need it for strategic advancement of other things on this list, right? So, whether it's expanding facilities or building housing, sometimes someone might be selling, we didn't realize that was going to happen, suddenly it's there, and do we have the money to act quickly? Like, do we have a source of funding where we could purchase property swiftly? So planning for that so that we have an opportunity to act on those opportunities in the future.
Sure, and we do include in our budget, this is primarily on the transportation and utility side, we do exactly that. We're always looking for those opportunities. When a property comes up for sale, it's a lot easier to acquire when we have two parties that, one wants to sell, one wants to buy. So we definitely budget for that, but your point's well taken in terms of, some of our general fund priorities, we don't quite do the same thing. That's all I have.
My question is does this commit or assign every reserve we have available?
It's pretty close. So it does not include the 2-month reserve. So that's just an unassigned, but that's a cash flow tool for us. We have a long list of restricted reserves that's not included in here, but we've tried to identify.
As of 12/31 of last year.
Correct.
That's what this looks like. But so we don't know what the final numbers really are going to look like until, what you're saying, May of next year?
Well, we'll feel pretty confident in the March timeframe, March, maybe early April.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're thinking the same lines I am. It might not coincide with your retreat, if that's what you're asking.
That's why I'm asking.
We'll
'cause
see.
I'll have a, you know, I would like to know what that is when we have a good number instead of, you know, it's great seeing what it was in the last year. I want to know what you know.
And depending on timing, when we have the retreat conversation, we get down to that hierarchy of priorities.
Because-
And then through the year, when you get.
Because again,
becomes
this is
more
end
known.
of, this is 12/31 of '22. This doesn't even take account closing out the budget, right? I mean, so,
January 26th will be difficult for me, but, you know, if we're looking at a February, March, I'll have a guess for you at that point. How's that?
And then as we go forward, based on those priorities,
usually pretty close.
based on the priorities that council sets, then through the assignment process until the following year where we set the council actions, we'd be putting those monies into those priorities.
And council could choose to pass another ordinance at any time. We've done it annually, but I also think the assigned reserve process has worked pretty well for us in terms of that flexibility. So, but you always have that option too.
yeah, it's, I guess, I'm always curious when you actually close the books out, what the actual number is, because we still don't have the number. This is at 12/31. So I would feel a lot better to actually know what those reserves are once you actually close it all out.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Okay, any questions? This is going to be come before council next Thursday. And with that, we are going to be adjourning into an executive session. The council will be in executive session for 15 minutes.
I would suggest that council convenes an executive session and we'll reconvene at 8:45. That gets transition and we'll be done later.
Okay. We will, we're going into exec session. We will reconvene at 8:45. Over here.
No, we'll
Reconvene at 8:45.
in the executive session or back out here? Okay.
We have returned from our executive session. No decisions were made. So without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned. And as always, you keep it classy, Lacey.